What is going on, y'all? Thank you so much for joining me. This is Ending the Stigma. My name is Chris Hennessy, and it as I've created the events for this is the third episode of this season. Like this is the fifth season of Ending the Stigma, and it's crazy to me that we've gotten here. I started out. I mean, y'all all know I have a justice involved background with addiction and being going to prison and all that kind of stuff. So we started this show out as a way to kind of raise awareness and then the stigma surrounding addiction and justice involved people and all that kind of stuff, and we still do that to an extent, but the focus of it has shifted to not only justice involved people and not only addiction or former addicts and all that. It's shifted to human trafficking, and what we're doing at the Raven is here, and we fight monsters. And like I sit back sometimes when I'm creating these events and I'm like, wow, just look at the evolution of the show and how it's all happened. And it's a God thing and I love it. Let me take a minute real quick to say hi to some people. David Cause, what's going on, man? Glad you're here. Michael Russell, what's going on, man? Thanks for dropping in. Casey Abels, my sister from another mister. I love you, sis. Thanks for dropping in. My guest tonight. So like I've had all of probably 15 minutes of in real life conversation with this guy. We met last month in December whenever, we showed up to Memphis for Christmas in the Hood. Hey, Chasen was like a guest on like season 1 or 2 way back in the day when I was just starting to do this. He was at the Airbnb. We had an amazing, worship service with Brad and Kalila Riga. Michael was there. We talked very briefly then. The next day, whenever we were in the hood, serving chili and giving out serving chili with beans, by the way, which just absolutely broke my heart. And then handing out toys to the kids and just blessing those folks. We had another few minutes to talk there. And he reached out to me last week and he was like, hey, bro, like, I'd love to be on the show. If you'd have me, like, I have a story and sometimes I'm funny. And I was like, I can handle funny sometimes. Hey, Leanne. Leanne's one of my oldest best friends. How are you, ma'am? Thanks for dropping in. So when somebody says, I have a story and I'm funny sometimes, I'm like, that's all the intro you really need. Like, I don't even need to do an intro call. So anyway, I'm not going to waste any more time talking about it. Michael, thanks for joining us. Thanks for being here. How you doing, man?
Doing good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for being here, dude. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Yeah. Casey said, man, you got to sit at Huey's with Michael. We didn't even go to Huey's last time we were there, Casey. Like, that's how crazy it was. Like, it was such a whirlwind trip. We dropped in on Friday and left on Sunday. We didn't even go to Huey's.
You missed
So I'm
out.
jealous. Yeah, I know. Like, I've eaten Huey's a bunch, though, man.
Yeah,
Like, I
that
have.
was my
I
first
have.
experience. So
Was it like
yeah,
like it's a big dog, Cody Abels. What's going on, man? Um, So for those of you that don't know about Huey's, that is Ben's like go-to place. He eats there every day when he's in Memphis, unless Jess makes him go somewhere else. And it's just a burger joint. They have a bunch of cool burgers and different variations of burgers, but that's Ben's place. And so if you go to Memphis, you will end up at Huey's with Ben Owen. I promise you.
good deal. Good evening.
Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for all the highs and all that good stuff. So
Yeah. So David, why don't you, or Michael, why don't you? I'm looking at David's comment. Michael, why don't you just tell us a little bit about like just tell us your story, man. Start wherever you want to start and take us wherever you want to take us.
okay, perfect. So probably like a lot of people, we've had the discussions that I ended up in a point in my life that was, dealing with addiction, drug abuse, criminal everything. Um, And I think, one of the things that I've thought about a lot is that I was running statistics on one of the videos we just put out. And, one of the things with drug abuse and incarceration of the majority of people are they have similar things in common. One of those things, obviously, is traumatic experiences as a child. My first trauma came when I was in second grade. I got lit on fire. So, it's like a
Wow.
super extreme, things happen. I had a good family life as far as I had good parents that loved me and grew up in
Yeah.
church and all that good stuff. But, you
Yep.
know,
Me too.
things happen though, and
Yeah.
it's, Satan attacks wherever he wants to. So, um, it started with that. It kind of was a progression. I was I guess the psychology textbook that, I was picked on. I was all of the things that go with it. And I got to a point in my life where, this wasn't really a thing at that point, but I was probably either going to commit suicide, turn into a school shooter, or go into with gangs and drugs and things like that. I obviously chose gangs, drugs, and that lifestyle. And it basically lasted till I was pushing 30. So
Hmm.
it was a very tumultuous experience. Everybody that has been in that life knows the extremes that it goes from point A to point B. And, that's the thing though, is that God protects you and God kind of puts you in a position
Man, doesn't
to,
he?
I mean, and I know everybody's got these stories that, are miraculous in the sense that how many times you should have been dead, how many times could, um, all of these things happen. So, that's what kind of happened, time after time after time again. It was, I was in a situation, and it was like, how did I make it through there?
Yeah. Yeah.
I was fortunate. I mean, I say I was fortunate because I think anybody um, that is involved in lifestyles like that, probably all of them should be spending the rest of their life in prison or be dead. So,
Hmm.
I feel fortunate in the sense that God gave me that other opportunity to do something different with my life. And, that's kind of where I've been pushing the last almost 20 years now is, going from the, I guess, what nobody would have thought could have been a success, or, that there was no way that I was going to change my life. And, I was the extreme version.
Yeah.
So, you know, and anyway, so that was kind of the leading up to it. And of course, there's, thousands and thousands of details that could be talked
Sure.
about in that process. But, I think one of the last time I got arrested, and there was a couple of key, I guess, pivotal points in my thought process. One of the thoughts was that, you know, and I think a lot of people can relate to this that have gone through those experiences, is that the type of person that you have to be to survive, not only survive, but thrive in that environment is
Yeah.
not a very pleasant person. There's no emotion, there's no anything. I mean, you're devoid of love, joy, hope, whatever. So that process of going back and forth, I was like, I don't have like I was tired. Like, I guess mentally I was tired, and I was like,
Yeah.
I'm going to make the decision that this is going to be my life, and I'm going to go out like a gangster and just do it. Like, screw it, and or I've got to quit doing what I'm doing. And
Hmm.
that was one of the key thoughts. And then the other key thought is that the last, I guess I went on about an 18-month run the last time, and it sticks into my brain. And I was an IV, like using methamphetamines, cocaine. I like going fast. So,
Yeah, I did too.
so
So, just as a sidebar, this is a funny sidebar. So, at the same time I was doing math, the brother right underneath me was doing pills. He was doing somas, and he'd like be like, "Bro, I took these somas and I slept for 3 days." And I was like, "Bro, I bought this 8 ball of dope and I was up for 5. Like, we are not the same person."
right, right,
Yeah,
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 that was me. I mean, it wasn't
yeah,
like.
yeah, 100%.
I used coke to come off of meth. Like, that was how I'd come down. I'd be like, okay, let's get
Really?
a little bit of coke and slow down for
Yeah,
get that
yeah,
quick, and then I could go to bed after a couple weeks. So, um, but I was very extreme. So I was selling drugs. I was doing a lot of dealing with some of the Mexican cartels as far as moving
yeah,
ice. Um, so I got to the point where people didn't want to buy drugs from me because they were scared, like they were fearful of the type of person I was. I mean, I would walk in a 357 each hand and be like, "What you want?" And people
yeah,
were like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, cool
yeah,
down." So
Yeah.
I had gone in these people's bathroom, and I was at a house dropping something off, and I'd gotten to the point where, when you first start doing drugs and doing things like that, you're like measuring it out, making sure you get the right amount of water, the right amount of this. At Towards the end, I would just dip a big old spoon in there, throw some water on it, and go for it. Well, I
Yeah.
went to do that, and I ended up with some. I guess it was a whole lot purer than I thought it was. And I
Hmm.
mean, I don't have any idea how much. I know that I couldn't hardly register because I would have my syringe so filled up. And I
Yeah.
hit myself, and I was standing in front of the mirror. And as soon as I did it, I knew I'd screwed up. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh shit. So I go to sit on the
Yeah.
toilet. I hit the toilet, and I hit the toilet. I'm like, I'm going to fall over. So I slid onto the floor, leaned up against the bathtub, and I spent 2 hours. And the reason I know it was 2 hours is because when I went back out there, it was daylight. And when I went in there, it was like 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And the entire time, I was kind of half praying to God, but half just telling myself, it's like, okay, heart, I just need you to beat one more time. Okay. And then I would feel it beat. And then I'd be like, okay, God, I need my heart to beat one more time. And then I pick up my phone and I try to call my mom and tell her bye. So, like I'm on the phone at 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, this is it. I'm done. Um, so, that didn't make me stop right then. Once I finally was able to, I got over
Yeah.
that initial thing. I was like, okay, keep going.
Yeah.
But
Fear is never a long term motivator
right,
for getting clean.
exactly. But the one thing that it did was it put me into a position that when I had, obviously I never did recovery on my own. It was always, it was extracurricular reasons that, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, you're stopped now. Okay, now I'm in county jail or whatever. But,
Right.
I thought about it and I was like, this is like, is this who I am? Am I a person that wants to be sitting on a floor praying out to God to, to
Yeah.
only live? And
Right.
I realized that I did want to live. I realized that, that God had a purpose for my life. He had protected me over and over again. And that was kind of the transition point where, I was thinking, I was like, you know what? I've either got to make a complete change. And when I say a complete change, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm still an asshole. I still, like I still have my own stuff, but in that lifestyle, it was something that I knew that I either had to be done or just say screw it, and that was the rest of my life. So anyway,
Yeah.
so that was after that. It was, I mean, realistically, that was the last time I got arrested. You know, they put me on this super intensive probation drug stuff. I'm going to the PO 3 times a week. Um, I'm doing all this stuff, and anyway, I was like, I'm done. So I decided to do the right thing, and I have been working. And this is something I've been thinking a lot about lately. And you see, and I've got kind of this could turn into a big discussion, but the whole identity thing.
Hmm.
So,
Mm.
the,
Well, I can get with some identity stuff, so
right,
I can
yeah,
preach on that because
right,
God, the so just to give you a little bit of a backstory on this, like not to interrupt you, but at the same
yeah, because
time, like I went to prison in 2008. We opened while I was there. Um, TDCJ made it mandatory that all all units have a faith-based storm. And so I opened up. I was part of the first group that went through the faith-based storm. I graduated the 2 years, finished 4 years, the last 2 years as a mentor. But literally, like it was 100% God because I was outside of Houston by about an hour and a half, and there was 3 or 4 different churches coming in that were volunteers there, and all of them we're preaching on your identity and who you are in Christ. And you're not a drug addict. God never said you were a drug addict. He never said you were a piece of shit. He never said all these things about you. What he said was, you're a king, you're a priest, you're forgiven, you're redeemed, you're a leader, like you're all these things. And so for 4 years, this was dumped into me, and it was 4 years that I needed. So when I got out, I still felt bad for the stuff I did, but it wasn't like there was all this guilt and shame. Like, okay, God, I'm not that person. That is not who God says that I am.
right.
Anyway, I could go on for
Yeah,
about
yeah.
that for hours.
And
But
and
yeah, anyway.
you're in the same place, and
Yeah.
the and I think, and this is part of the problem, that I think that growing up in church, I grew up in a very legalistic
Same,
type
bro.
background. Like, the independent Baptist, it
Same.
was all about the rules, the laws, and it's like you're going to do this and you're going to do that. And
Yep.
so by doing that, it was there was an identity crisis in the church anyway. So
Oh
I was
yeah.
a very
Yeah.
confused, like I was always like, okay, you have to look this way, you have to act this way. I ended up going to a church, and it was kind of that way. I was still like the black sheep, and I probably was a little bit of the
Yeah.
black sheep, but
Yeah.
I struggled with, and I'm sure I did not. So, I was that hard headed guy. So I
Yeah.
refused to go to chapel when I mean, I grew up, I believed in God. I knew Jesus was there. I refused to go to chapel because, most of the
Same.
people in the prison jail ministries, number one, they were either running game, or number two, they were the sorriest people, wherever you were at. Like that, most of those people, they were there to hide, and
Yeah.
and I'm not saying everybody, but a large portion
No,
of them.
for sure.
So, like I stayed completely away from that. So when I get out, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to church, and I wanted to belong, and I read the books. Like, I love to read. So, you get those books that are talking about the people that have um, these life changing experiences, and how God just makes this transformation. It's like, you feel like you should, like, man, I should feel something crazy. Like I should feel this immediate, transformation, to where it's like all of it seems okay. And it really confused me, because I question my relationship with God and my identity, because it's like, okay, why am I not having that feeling? Why do I not feel like, oh man, I can go out and conquer the world, and I want to do everything right and everything? Why do I still have these dark parts of my life, in my thought processes? So I spent a few years trying to come to grips with, to your point, that the identity, once you have an identity in Christ, like I was proud. Like I was like, hey man, I'm a convict. That was my, I don't know, my
Hmm.
security blanket. Hey, like I wanted that hardness about me.
Yeah.
I embraced it, because I did
Yeah.
not understand that I could be anything other than that. So,
Yeah.
so that process. So it took me a little while to get to the point where I was like, you know what? To your point, yes, I did drugs. I'm not a drug addict anymore.
Come on.
I did this. I am not this anymore. Like, these
Come
things
on.
are not who I am,
Come on.
because God, God brought me away from that. God saved me from that. God took those things away. So once I came to grips with that, then everything was much, like, I had a much better perception of the world. And I was like, you know what? If this isn't what I am, I can be anything that I want to be. And
Yes.
so, back to the God blessing thing. I mean, you know what the difficulties and the challenges are with the types of jobs that you can get. I mean, I've gotten
Yeah.
turned down from being a trash man. I mean, like, to that point
Yeah.
where they're like,
Yeah.
no, we don't want you. So, God, the way that God blesses is that I would go in, and I would be the hardest worker. I would be the best worker. I'd be the smartest worker. And literally, and I think, the co-founder of our nonprofit, his wife just sent a message up there. But when I met, his name's Chancey, and his wife's Kristen Greer, but they're on, I think, watching. But I met Chancey. I literally was working for a company, and his brother-in-law at the time was one of the owners of the company. And Chancey was like a 23-year-old, fresh out of the Marine Corps, just got through doing multiple combat deployments. And I'm 30 at that point, and we were both hard headed. We were both, like, we still had the attitude, and we got
Yeah.
along great. Like, the day that I met him, I'm like, who the F are you? And he's like,
Right.
well, who the F are you? And we've been friends since, like,
Right.
so we
Right.
went through that process. But, um, like, I was working for the union as an electrician, and got laid off. I go take this job being like washing trucks, like, hand scrubbing like semi trucks.
Yeah.
And we go mobile, right? So we're mobile. I started that job working maybe 20 hours a week, and I was making, I think, like $8 an hour. 4 years later, when I left that company, I was making close to 200,000 a year, running the
Wow.
entire company, had, opened up offices all over the country. I mean, it was a process. Chancey ended up leaving.
Sure.
Yeah, but we kept our friendship. So, and it was like, hold up, I went from not being able to get the job as a trash person to I know how to run. I can run operations, and I found out I was good
Right.
at it. And through that process,
And like, just to put that into perspective, if you were making 200 grand a year, it's probably a multi-million dollar company.
it was, yep,
Yeah. And so
it,
you went from
absolutely.
making $8 an hour to knowing how to run a multi-million dollar
So
company in 4
an
years.
operations, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Um, and it was not like it was learning. Like it was all right. Let me learn as I go. It makes sense. I'm super ADHD, so I was always hyper analyzing everything. I'm like, okay, I can make
Yeah.
this. This is how it needs to be. And God took strengths that I didn't know I had that
Yeah.
had been weaknesses throughout. I say weaknesses, but they had caused weakness. The drugs and stuff like that. It was a self medication. So,
Sure.
like I felt good. Like I felt good on when I was doing some speed, Adderall, abusing Adderall, doing whatever I was doing. So anyway, so God just continued that process. He continued to bless me. He continued to open up opportunities. And I went back down. I quit that job and ended up back to like a $50,000 a year job. Then I would work that one. I worked my way up to that, and just kept this process going. Um, and here I am, almost 50 now, and it's my God has done a crazy amount of stuff in spite of my
Yeah.
selfishness, in spite of my and I don't know, it's in spite of my motivation, I guess. And
Yeah.
I was having a conversation with my dad, and my dad's a pastor, and go figure, right? Like,
Yeah.
um, so I was having a conversation. I said, the great thing about God is that in spite of our motivation, in spite of our reasons, in spite of our failures, that He knows what He wants from you, and you're going to do it. Like, it doesn't matter why you think you're doing it or what you think the reason that you're doing it at the time. It's easier if you do it because you know that that's what He wants you to do, but you're going
Yeah.
to do it one way or the other. And that's what I'm thankful for. When God is there, he allows you to do things that you don't even realize that you've done until you look back and you're like, wow, how did that happen? So
Yeah.
yeah. So anyway,
Dude, it is crazy, like the similarities in our stories. Like, I grew up in a very legalistic household. It was back, my parents got saved in like 84-ish. Whenever I was 4, I was born in 80. Started going to Assembly of God Church. And back in the day, it didn't matter really what denomination you were going to. And I feel like, from like my recollection of the church starting in 84, 85 up until 2000 ish, give or take a few years, it was that whole very legalistic thing across the board, the church as a whole. I'm talking about the whole body of Christ.
right.
um and then it seems like to me, just looking at different denominations and having been a part of it, in prison, and all the different denominations coming in, it moved from a very legalistic standpoint to a very relationship standpoint, where it wasn't about the rules. It was, you followed the rules because you love the Lord. It wasn't because somebody was telling you you had to do them.
And
And
the
I think
grace,
that, in the grace, man, like, and
the
I think that
grace.
was the shift for me as I grew up in that. And, I was church hurt, and I left the church. I never turned my back on God, but I left the church. Um, and I went to prison, and I was like, I'm not going to chapel. Like, screw that. I'm not going. And I
Right.
went one day, and I told this whenever I got off parole. I got off parole next month will be 2 years. And I did a live stream and told my whole entire testimony the day my last day on parole, my last night. But part of it, I was at the Choice More unit in Bottom, Texas, and my friend Leanne, who's on here, she came up and saw me one time. Um, went to the chapel. Like, it was split on A side and B side. It was a fairly small unit. It was 1,200 people, and the chapel held 75 or 80 people. So, I go to church one Sunday morning just on a whim, And this is how long ago it was. This was like '09 ish. Like somebody had brought their iPod in and hooked it up to TV. You know, it was an
Right.
iPod. Um, and they played the video by Jesus Culture. It was Kim Walker Smith singing the song "How He Loves." Oh, how He loves us. Oh, how He loves us. And I'd never heard it. Didn't know who this girl was. Never heard of Jesus Culture. And it was the very first time I had ever actually felt like I heard about it since I was 4. And by this time I'm, 28, 29, somewhere in there. Um, that I actually felt the love of God. And as she's singing that song, it was about an 8-minute video. I just felt the love of God wash over me. And I'm sitting there in this chapel full of like 80 dudes. Like you said, you go to chapel in prison, like it's a whole mix of people who are anywhere from not serious to really serious. And they're there to see their boyfriend or to swap whatever kind of contraband or whatever.
Right.
And I'm sitting there and the love of God washes over me and I just start weeping. And I wasn't 100% changed then, but that was the beginning of me realizing, oh my gosh, God does love me and he really does want a relationship. Yeah, Andrew James, he was there that Sunday. This is my boy from that unit. He was there that Sunday. And it was so cool because like he's a brother in Christ and we slept literally like it was, and I've told this story 100 times on here, just about every time he pops up. Like at Choice Moore, the bunk beds were so close together. It was an open dorm. I could stand between the bunks and like my shoulders, I could move about this much and my shoulders would touch the bunks. And one row of them was head to head. So for a year and a half, I literally slept my head a foot from Drew's head. So we ate, and it was a whole thing because like it was a transfer unit, a lot of gang activity, and you know how it is in prison. Like races don't eat with each other.
Right.
Whites can eat with Mexicans sometimes, but whites definitely don't eat with blacks. And so I caught a crap ton of flack for eating with this dude. But like he was my brother in Christ, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like I didn't get down with anybody while I was there. But like if it hadn't been for Drew, like it was like he just encouraged me in the Lord a whole lot while I was there. So Drew, I'm glad you heard this story, and I'm glad you remember that Sunday, dude, because that was literally the beginning of the end of what I thought Christianity was, what I knew it was, and that was the very beginning of knowing who I was in Christ.
Awesome. I just realized my
Yeah.
dog can be seen in the background.
No, that's cool, dude. Do you know how many times I've been bombed by like dogs and kids?
Right.
Like it happens all the time.
Yeah, his bed's behind me. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's a and that's kind of to the point where you are at now with the experiences in your life and just knowing that you have to like so. And once again, confusing religion is back to. I've seen a lot of comments about the
Yeah.
religion part. Religion confuses a lot of things,
Yeah.
and the unfortunate part, and I'm not taking away from the church. I think that the church is a
Yeah.
necessary thing,
It is. It's
absolutely.
vital. Yep.
But I think that it's a very there's human error no matter where you go. Like
Yep.
it's not infallible. Like you can't expect perfection from a preacher, from a congregation. But I do think that a lot of times, back to the grace, back to the love aspect of it. With that is the calling, right? The purpose that
Yeah.
that God puts in your heart. And, this is, and I'm going to put a plug in, back to our nonprofit is that,
Yeah, and yeah, go ahead because go ahead and segue into your nonprofit because I want to get into what y'all do because I still don't know 100% of what y'all do. So let's
okay.
segue into that. Go ahead.
Yeah. So back to this, right? So to the, like, going back to prison ministries, to jail ministries, right? So, anybody that's ever been in jail or something, as soon as you go to church, they're like, oh, you should go join the prison ministry. And for me, that back to I'm still working. I'm a very cynical individual when it comes to people. So
Same,
I
same,
was like, you know
man.
what, I really don't care about those people. Like
Yeah,
most of them. I know it sounds terrible, and I have complete respect and love for the people that do. It just was not, back to the perception of what I experienced as far as the people that I met, that I knew in general. Once again, you had your group that was, that was truly authentic in what they were seeking. But I was like, you know what, that's for somebody else. And, I look back at kind of, going back to my childhood, is that there was a point in my life, probably, I don't know, maybe 13, 14 years old, that I needed, I needed something different, and I needed something that I needed some strong men. My dad is a very, he's more of like the intellectual type. So he doesn't have that super strong personality like I do. And I have a very strong personality. So it was a very difficult thing growing up for him and I to kind of meet eye to eye. My
Yeah.
dad, my parents, good, bad, or indifferent, it was to turn the other cheek, not, blast them right in their face.
Yeah.
If they do this, go, whatever. So I had a different perspective. For me personally, I needed to be taken in to a place to where I could feel, number one, I could feel safe. Number two, that I had people that were going to encourage me in a different way. And that is, encourage me to be a man, understand that, strength comes in many forms. But, what's that Jordan Peterson thing saying, that they're saying, they said that a, what is it? A good man is a violent man that chooses not to be violent, or something like that. And
Yeah.
somebody that is just completely passive, they're not a great man, because they don't have the capacity for violence. So they're just weak. And I was more on that side of, I had that strength, but I didn't know how to access it. And then, you flip a couple years later, and all of a sudden I find out, oh, I can fight, and oh wow, I like to fight. And all of a sudden, I
Yeah.
go from being the picked on kid to the other extreme version of being violent.
And
So
Ben and Jess, and I don't even remember what it says. It was the very first shirt I bought from them, and my dog chewed it up. But it says something to the effect of "Dangerous times call for good men to do dangerous deeds."
yeah,
In that same vein, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't
right,
mean you just go out there and kick ass and take names, but at the same time, you do need to get out there and fight for what's right. You just have to learn how to channel it.
right. So
Ooh,
kids,
I like that, Leanne. It's better be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. Come
yeah,
on.
was that Nietzsche? I think.
It probably is. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It
Eh,
sounds like him.
yeah. So, there you go. So that was my thing. Is kind of, that was my burden, was that, that type of a child. The
Yeah.
child. And I thought about it from my perspective. Is, I didn't come from a like an inner city, or nobody would have ever expected that I was going to be an at-risk youth.
Yeah.
But I was. So fast forward, so that's been my heart, right? And I've had this forming part for a very long time. And and now goes the segue into Chansey. So Chansey and I've been friends for almost 20 years now, and we've done good, bad, and indifferent. I mean, we've literally been kicked out of every club in Panama City, which is where he's from.
Yeah.
We've had our experiences. And so we get to the point where, you know, we ended up about back in September. So I had already started dealing, like going through the paperwork to form this nonprofit, right? And all of a sudden, the Hurricane Helene hits, and Chancey calls me. He's like, "Hey, you want to go do some hurricane work?" And I'm like, "Sure, let's go." So he's in Panama City, and I'm like, "Where are we going to go?" Because we got Florida, we've got North Carolina, and out of, once again, the God's providence, we're like, okay, we're going to head to North Carolina. We're He gets a phone call from one of his junior Marines that he hasn't talked to in 15 years, and he's like, "Hey, all these people are meeting at this Harley Davidson in Swannanoa, which is right outside of Asheville. Show up." And there's a lot of stuff online that you see with the Savage Freedom Relief Fund, and I've been following Ben. Ben ended up going to drop off like 600 doses of Narcan, and dropped us some off because we're up in the
Yeah.
mountains. But him and I just head up there, right? And we were up, okay, we're going to make some money from doing, I've got a company, we're going to go make some, some disaster money cleaning up. We get there, of course, it's a shit show, right? I mean, it was, it
Right.
was, it was
Yeah.
a war, it was a war zone.
Yeah.
And, we're up there, no power, no electricity. We're in the middle of the mountains, people rolling around with ARs and, their pistols on their side. It was like the Wild West. And,
Yeah.
you know, I ended up being up there for almost a straight month. And it was like, you don't realize the impact that just completely unplugging from everything was.
Hmm.
So once again, we're sleeping in a tent. I went a week without a shower at one point. It's just it's complete chaos, and I was the most peaceful mentally that I have been in so long. I mean, like my brain was clear. I was sleeping better. We're running search and rescue missions. We're doing this. We're doing that. We're running. We're running 100 miles an hour, and I was peaceful. And I've always had a heart for veterans. I love the country. I love the veterans. I love the people, and then the experience that we were with. Like I was one of the few people in our group that was a non-veteran, and I earned my respect. They're like, okay, and I would everybody be like, oh, you're a veteran. I'm like, no, I'm a veteran gangster. So, it was kind of like my plug-in. But
Right.
anyway, so going to the point to where I had already thought about the ranch, um, like it had already been forming in the way that I wanted to see it go, and where the veteran part comes in. Obviously, Chancey's one of my best friends, and he's kind of a nutcase too. So, Chancey, guys that put it. So back to the veteran suicide. So right now they're like at 44 a day. They said that 44 veterans a day commit suicide. One of the key things to that we kind of see in that is that people automatically assume that these veterans are committing suicide because of what they experienced on the battlefield, which is an incorrect thing. What they're having issues with is that once they get home, they lack purpose. They are, you take Chancey. He was a
Yeah.
infantry machine gunner, so he was trained to be a machine gunner. He was trained to go out there and do whatever he was going to do. Go out there, fight. To his point, he said, I think he was 17 when he went into the Marines. He just graduated, 17 years old. He was indoctrinated with the Marine Corps, doctrine, and they formed his brain into what he was going to be. So you get home. What is somebody who is running around? Chancey's a 175-pound guy that was a machine gunner, which is not a normal thing. It's normally the big, tall, muscular guys. He was the little guy, right? Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so anyway, so you've got all these guys that they get back to the United States, or they get out of the service, and they have no purpose. So our thought, the way that we see it is to create a ranch that is a working ranch that's running their own cattle line, and
Man.
creating a I mean, I could go into all, like, I start telling you my dream, we'll be here for 4 hours. But
No,
basically,
that's
what
good. And did you meet Michael Parker,
I did,
the
yep,
dog
I talked,
trainer?
yeah,
He
yeah, I
has
did.
something similar with that. So somebody else, and I'll do an intro on Messenger if y'all are not connected yet, but you need to connect with Michael Springer and Justin Works. They're out of it's just north of Little Rock, but they're with two different organizations called We Are the 22 and Call to Duty, where they deal with veteran suicide and veteran addiction. Like that's their whole goal. Like I met them, they were there the first time we went to Memphis, and they are just like they're two rock stars. Like Ben will vouch for them. Like he brought them in there. Like they're freaking amazing.
Right. So you got your guys, right? And back
Yeah.
back to this. So you got this, and in my brain, and I want to make sure to throw like a caveat into that. One of the things that we experienced in North Carolina, we were staying at this guy's property. We had at one point we had about 80 people out in the field camped. We're running missions up in I say missions. We're running up into the mountains doing whatever we're doing, and we had one of the veterans lose their shit. It was a very very crazy experience. I mean, I'm talking about like
Yeah.
he was getting ready to get put down crazy. Now
Yeah.
people think about some of the challenges that veterans face. This would be like once a person was graduated, like I foresee these people, and you take your Michael Parkers, which I met, or people that are just, they've got their PTSD. They're not going to, you're not going to go postal on somebody, but to where they can be in an environment and help mentor the kids, like where these kids are learning how to hunt and to fish and to work cattle and to feed chickens and to do a garden. But also it is, in my vision that it is where they live. And, like
Hmm.
you have I want to take all the institutional, institutional feel. Like imagine Yellowstone mixed with Hogwarts, and you like that's my vision. Like you have this like
Yeah,
lodge type experience where
dude.
you've got all these people there, and at the end of the day, everybody's eating dinner at these long tables, and you've got the guys coming in from the fields or doing whatever they're
Yes.
doing, and the kids are there, and what you're doing is you are equipping and you are training a a group of kids to do whatever they want, but also to give them back to the grassroots, mindsets of, hey, this is what happens when you go out and work for your food, or this is what happens, and in my brain, like, we've got somebody doing, jujitsu training with them every night for an hour just to give them confidence. You're teaching them
Yeah.
how to do all of these things that is being lost. And back to the ranch part, one of the girls that's on our board, um, so she's young. She is, I think it's number 14. So in the history of the Marine Corps, there's been 16 women that have become officers in charge of infantry battalions or companies. So Morgan is number 14 out of 16. So she's a badass. Like I don't care what anybody says.
Yeah.
She's a skinny looking blonde headed girl that grew up on horses and ranches, and she wants her vision is to create this place to bring into the culture of ranching, which to train the veterans how to have like a skill. And one of the
Yeah.
things that's going on with the ranches nowadays is that, you know, family ranches have been being passed down, but the
Yeah.
new generation doesn't want anything to do with them, so they're being sold off to large corporations. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like to train the veterans how to have a skill set, which is something that's being lost in the American culture at this point. And so that's kind of that. So yeah.
Dude, I just see, and I think I mentioned this to you, like maybe your first time you showed up at the Friday men's Bible study, like just listening to your vision, like there's not a doubt in my mind that God has not brought you into this group of people for such a time as this, because you've got, Ben and Robert working with Flanders Fields, and we fight monsters with people in addiction and veterans that are homeless and in addiction. Michael Parker, who has experience with working with a ranch and veterans and all that kind of stuff. And I think I mentioned Justin Downing to you with the Green Beret Project. He's a former Green Beret, and he's not even going to get into what he does right now, but like he has a nonprofit focusing on, reaching at-risk youth. Um, and not to say that you would ever want to copy any of them, because, and I've said this 100 times before, as Ben and I have had this conversation, is, our missions are aligned. They're going to be different. Like God's called
Right.
us to different things, but he also puts people in our lives to be able to feed into us and, offer insight and all that kind of stuff. So like
Right.
just hearing your story, and I'm sitting here, my mind's pinging like, okay, I know this person, I know this person, I know this person, like just as somebody to bounce ideas off of. You know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely.
not to say you don't want to copy them, but at the same time, it's like God has put put you in this group of people for just such a time as this.
Right. And back to that, the way God's worked stuff. So I don't know, probably 2 years ago, I was.
Ben, hang on just a second. Ben, I try doing him on Facebook. Like I'm friends with him on both platforms, but he's not very active on either social media. But Ben, try and tag Justin on Facebook. Maybe it'll work.
So so they opened up a Black Rifle Coffee, like actual retail store right down the road from my house, and this is how I found Ben. So I'm trying to pull up, like I'm on LinkedIn or something, and I was like, they just like it was the grand opening, and I was like out there getting my cup of coffee, and I was going to send a picture, like I'm glad to have a Black Rifle Coffee company. So I was trying to tag them, and so what pops up? So this is 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So what pops up is Black Rifle Company. So I was like, what in the world? So I would, I was driving, I like click and I'm like, follow it. And so all of a sudden I start getting all this stuff from Black Rifle Company. And it's like, I'm like seeing all this stuff with Flanders Fields and I'm seeing all the stuff with We Fight Monsters. And I start watching it and I'm like, man. So I keep watching it, like, and that's how I started the process of learning about, Ben and the stuff that they were doing with all the
Dude,
different
I
organizations.
followed Black Rifle Company thinking they were Black Rifle Coffee Company
Right. Right.
originally when I first got on LinkedIn.
Yep.
And that led, like, that was years ago.
Uh,
And then, they eventually changed the title on LinkedIn where it says Black Rifle, and then in parentheses it says not
not,
coffee.
not coffee. Right.
But through that, I got, started following Ben and Jess and Robert and Flanders Fields and We Fight Monsters and all that. So that's funny. Like, and I firmly believe too, like, and I don't know how Ben would feel about this, but Black Rifle Coffee had such a huge platform. And
Right.
I know they didn't intentionally name their company after that, but I firmly believe, like, just thinking about it now, that God used that to grow their following.
Absolutely.
Because, like, there's no telling how many people accidentally clicked on that thinking it was Black Rifle Coffee. And now all of a sudden they're supporters of what Flanders and Monsters is doing. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. And back to that same thing is, Chancey, him and I were talking about it, and he was randomly talking one day. I don't know, it's probably a year ago, year and a half ago. He's like, "Hey man, you ever see that guy, that veteran dude that's doing the stuff down in wherever?" So we start talking about it, and come to find out, we're both watching the content of what We Fight Monsters is putting out. So, back to the God working thing. I mean, I am 100% convinced that nothing happens for except for a reason, and I believe that God is very divine in the way that he puts things together in
Yeah.
introductions, and once again, probably 2 months. Well, Chancey and I were talking about this when we were in North Carolina. If you would have asked me 2 weeks before that whether or not whether or not I would have ever been in the middle of the North Carolina mountains, not taking a shower, um, going through doing what we were doing, I would have been like,
Yeah.
never in a million years would that thought
Never.
process have crossed my mind, and
Same, bro.
never would I have. I mean, and and this is coming from Chancey, not obviously me, because I've never been in a battlefield type situation, but one of the things that everybody was saying is that it was kind of like being deployed,
Mm-hmm.
and the feeling was the same.
Mm-hmm.
That I mean, not that we had people shooting at us. I mean, there was some crazy stuff happening, but it wasn't like we knew that. Other than our crazy veteran, we didn't have people trying to kill us. So,
Right.
um, but at the end of the day, it's like you never imagine. I mean, I was living my
Never.
life. This was literally, I had just gotten back like 2 weeks before that. Chancey and I we were out in the Bay of Destin fishing on a boat where,
Yeah.
like we take our vacation in Florida, and we were, and I mean, literally 2 weeks before it. Now we're in the middle of North Carolina. Neither one, it's just, it's kind of crazy how God works. And then, you
It
know,
is, man. Like, you don't,
anyway,
even coming out of an addiction background and having done prison ministry before my brother died, March 8th will be a year. So if you'd have told me 11 and a half months ago that I'd be doing what I'm doing, that, I'd be involved with people that are in addiction and coming out of human trafficking, and even having, like, been a very small, this is still one of my favorite stories. And I've never told it online, but, like, in our men's group one day, um, somebody reaches out and was like, "Hey, we have an Afghan refugee. He was part of the Afghan Special Forces. He's here legally. He needs help. Does anybody know anybody?" He said, "Chris, do you know anybody in the, because I'm in Texas, you know
right,
anybody in San Antonio?" Well, I connected with a pastor on LinkedIn in San Antonio a couple months before, never had any interaction with him. And so I just reached out to him and was like, "Hey, bro, like, I know we've never talked, but, like, this is what we got going on." And in a matter of 2 hours, we had this Afghan refugee who was an allied forces, like, literally helped our special forces guys in Afghanistan, um, that had come here on asylum with his family. We had him food for weeks, people reaching out to help them with furniture, like all the things, like that kind of stuff. Like in 2 hours, we had it worked out, and I was just sitting back, like for 2 days, I was just sitting here going, God, like this is the way you work. You
Right.
know what I mean? Like, but if you'd have told me 11 and a half months ago that I'd have been doing this kind of stuff, I'd have been like, no, no, bro, you got me messed up with someone else. Like, not
Right.
me.
Yeah. No, but that's the way that, that's the way just about everything I think happens. And it goes, like I said, you never see, everybody's like, oh, you look for the open door, you look for the open door. Me, I'm running. Like, there's a
Yeah.
there's a group that's called M46 Men. It was used to be Operation M46, but it's a fathers for fighting for the hearts of their children. And it started at a church that I went to here locally. But one of the things that they talk about is that they use, it's called a crash group, and a crash is what they call a group of rhinoceroses. And they said the thing about a rhino is it'll run 30 miles an hour in the one direction but can only see 5 feet in front of its face. And
Oh,
what
wow.
the whole point of that is that, you know, where we're supposed to, and that's me, like I'm the rhino, I'm going to run and run. And,
That's
God's,
the way I feel right now,
right.
dude. It really is.
You hear people talk, I made a joke. They're like, God's going to take the chisel and, chisel you into forming you and molding you. I'm like, God needs a chainsaw for me. Like there's
Yeah,
no
come
chisel.
on.
Like he's got the
No.
chainsaw and, that's about as good as you're going to get. And, I think I've come, my wife would probably question that. I say I've come a long way, but, she told me the other day I may be on the spectrum. She told me that yesterday. So anyway, well, I'll leave that at that. So,
Yeah, right.
but anyway, but yeah, so you know, I don't have time to look at the open doors. It's
Yeah.
I just God put something in my heart. I take off running, and I got a hard head, so I'm going to crash a few times, and then I'm going to, he's going to kind of bounce me up over a little bit, and, you know, go from there. So anyway, so that's my thing. So you guys want to know anymore? We just put out a new video today. I went ahead and put it out there. It kind of tells a little bit about what we're doing, and um, you know, and back to the stuff with what. And this is a very hard lesson that I've learned very very quickly. So I ran into some nonprofits while I was in North Carolina. They have, and I get this, right? Everybody's kind of focused on their own thing, their own objective, their own mission. But for me, it is something that, like here's an example. I've got my own ministry, my own direction that God's going to direct me. I
Yeah.
love I love what other people are doing, and you know that is where the brotherhood comes in. Is guess what?
Yeah.
Somebody wants to send $10 to Flanders Field or to We Fight Monsters or to the Raven or to whoever. Guess what? I am happy for you. Like that's
Yeah.
what I want to see. I want to see
Yeah.
like people thriving regardless of it, if it's me or if it's you or if it's whatever, because at the end of the day, we should all be working towards a
Yes.
common goal and a common purpose. We're going to come there from different directions, but I would hate to, I would hate to see, because of my own selfishness or because of my own desire or whatever, that like my own self-interest, to hinder or to get in the way of somebody else that
Oh
could
man. Yes.
be could be reached, could be
Yes.
helped. And and I see, like, to your point, I mean, in my big vision of things, like I see that marriage in the future of what
Yeah.
potentially could happen. Like, you
Yeah.
take, okay, I'm going to get into my dreaming part, but let's say that you take somebody from the streets of Memphis, right? You've got some veteran that's been doing this, doing that. They get into the program with Ben and they're doing their thing, and all of a sudden, guess what? How you feel about going and working on a ranch? And not only just going to work on a ranch, but we're going to train you. We're going to do this. We're going to do that.
Yeah.
And and I'm also the other part that I am I think is a important aspect. It is a difficult, and this is where the refugee type ranch comes in, is that I was able to remove, like I say, I was removed from my environment by number one, jail. And the last time that I was arrested, I ended up getting extradited to another state. So I went from where I lived at, that was my home, right? I could go to any institution in the system and I was at home. I'd walk in, I'd know people. I'm like, okay, I'm hooked up, I'm set, I'm comfortable. Let's ride. I'm out playing handball every day, hitting the gym, doing whatever I'm doing. And then I get thrown into Georgia. And guess what? It was a whole lot different. I was removed from my environment. I I want to say that I could go back into that environment, like maybe, but I know that I had a much easier time by starting fresh in a new place with new people with not that same mindset. It wasn't like I was going to run into, person A, B, and C, and they're like, "Oh, what's up? You want to get back up on your feet? Here you go. Here's a pound. Go do
Right,
your thing."
right,
So,
right.
and
Yeah,
in the beginning, it was good. I mean,
yeah,
going
yeah.
from having all the money and all the whatever I wanted in the world to okay, like 20 hours a week, $8 an hour. Like what do you do with
Yeah,
that? So so anyway, so that's kind of where the thought process is giving an escape
dude,
place, a place to bring people to. So yeah,
I'm 100% with you on that. And I actually did a post or two or three towards the end of the year last year, because December is a big giving month for nonprofits or whatever.
right,
And my mission may not resonate with somebody as much as maybe Flanders or your mission does, working with veterans.
absolutely,
You know what I mean?
right,
Um, they're aligned, but and not to throw shade on anyone, but like everybody, wants to support St. Jude's or the bigger
right,
nonprofit. But that may be a mission that aligns with them. Like I have one of my very best friends in the world, like I die for her right now, has never donated to our cause, but her alignment is with St. Jude's because she had a preemie baby.
hmm,
And so they helped her and helped her save her baby's life. And so that's where she puts her efforts towards.
right,
And you can't look at other nonprofits as a competition.
right,
You just can't. Like the way I look at it is if you have a cause that you believe in and you're doing something about it, then I'm not going to throw shade on you for not contributing to mine or Ben's or yours,
absolutely,
because you know what I mean? Because we're a team, or, it's part of the same army, or however you want to put it. Um, there shouldn't be any. And if you ever, and Ben told me this, he said, if you ever start working with another nonprofit and they start looking at you as competition, you just need to bow out,
right.
because you're
Well,
not.
and I'm going to give you a blessing thing to kind of to throw this out there. So I don't know, probably 10 years ago, I run into this guy, and anyway, through work processes, but he ends up starting a nonprofit, and they actually have a school in like a downtown Atlanta area for at-risk youth. Like it's a religious school. God is the focus. And him and I have talked back and forth. Right, he comes from like Buckhead money, which Ben knows what Buckhead money is, but anyway, so we've been back and forth. So whenever I started this process, I called him. I was like, hey, you know, I would like to, like I would like to pick your brain on some stuff, right? Like just on the nonprofit side of things because he's been doing it for a while. So randomly, and this is talks about helping people doing this, doing that. Randomly, I get a phone call today, like just sitting there. Matter of fact, I was getting ready to play Call of Duty, and I get a phone call and he's like, "Hey man, how's it going?" I'm like, "Good, good, good." He's like, "How's the nonprofit stuff going?" And I started telling him about the Panama City, the operation PCB for spring break that we're going to do. And he's like, "Oh man, it's awesome." He said, "Hey man," he said, "you guys have been on my heart." And he said, "We just got blessed with a donation, and we would like to donate towards that something specific like that." And I was like, "What?" Like here is a nonprofit that's
Love you too,
helping.
Ben. Thanks for dropping on, man. Appreciate you.
uh, So anyway, nonprofit that helps kids that's running a school. And here I am. He just randomly calls me and said, "Hey, we'd like to make a donation." This
Yeah.
guy hasn't been on our website. He hasn't been him and I talked a little bit, but that was the extent of it. And all of the sudden, like I said, out of the blue, and this is a crazy thing, right? So I know, throwing this out there. So I was one of the things that I understand the nonprofit side. When Chancey and I were there for a month, these guys aren't working. Like it's costing them money. So I understand the challenges for people that want to help. Not everybody has the financial means to just go spend a week
Sure.
somewhere. And
Sure.
so one of the things that I wanted to make sure of when I start asking about the whole, trying to get people that are interested in volunteering is trying to be able to cover as much of that cost as possible.
Yeah.
So when I called the place I ended up finding. It's a church camp that's actually on the beach, and I'm like, hey, we're with a nonprofit. The original price was like $50 a person per day, and I'm looking for 30 days and 30 people. So you can figure out the math on that. So they're like, hey, since
Freaking
what you
lot.
it's a lot. Like it was like $50,000, $60,000 just for the
Yeah.
for the lodging. And I was like, whoa, that was more than I was looking for places to camp and do all that stuff out there, right? So anyway, so they gave me a better rate, and the crazy thing is I went ahead and set it up to pay the 10%. I'm going to be honest with you, like the amount of money that still is, I don't have that just to go fork over
Sure.
to what's going on. But I was like, you know
Yeah.
what? I'm going to go ahead and pay the deposit, and I haven't, I have not asked for a single dollar at this point. I'm getting ready to start doing a fundraiser, but I haven't asked for a dollar. I haven't put out there that we're going to be raising money for it, and I just went in. I put like $1,600 deposit on the rooms, and all of a sudden today he's like, hey, I want to give you, we're going to give you this amount of money to help towards the process. And then he asked me how much it was going to cost. He's like, well, guess what? He said, I've got some donors that like causes. He said, let me talk to him. I mean, just so
I love it, dude.
completely God. And, anyway,
It blows me away on
right,
a very similar note, probably a little bit smaller scale. So I have a side gig or had a side gig. It's taken a very, very, very huge backseat since all of this happened. Of doing live streams for people, like doing back end producing and training people how to use the Restream software and all that. And I have one client right now, and they only do one show a month, and not every single month, but I'm actually subcontracted out. So it's my client's client they work in the nonprofit space, or they do digital fundraising and digital case studies to figure out what works and what doesn't, as far as like email campaigns, donation page copy and arrangement, like all kinds of crazy stuff. So randomly he messages me, and like it's the day we're leaving to come to Memphis last month. And he messages me randomly on LinkedIn. He's like, "Hey, Chris, I looked at your website. I saw, are y'all 501c3? We're doing our, next after is doing our end of year giving. We'd like to donate." And I was like, "Well, we're pending, so whatever you donate is still considered a tax donation,
right,
until everything's approved." He's like, "Okay, bet." Dude, I shit you not. 5 seconds later, I'm at my sister's. Like, we're literally loading up the car to go to Memphis. She pokes her head out the door. She said, "Who the F is so and so?" And I was like, because I have her set up to get the emails when we get a donation. And she was like, "He just donated X amount of dollars," and it was a
right,
four-figure donation.
yeah,
And I was just like, "Oh my God." Like, just all of a sudden, out of the blue, like just
right,
the way God works, stuff like that. You know what I mean? And it was right on time. Like, we really needed that money to be able to go to Memphis and do what we were going to do.
right,
Um, and it never ceases to amaze me every time, whether we're doing an Amazon gift list for a community event, or whatever it is. Like, it just never ceases to amaze me when God's like, "Okay, boom, here you go."
right, yeah,
Because in
and
my
it's
mind, I'm just like, how are we going to make this work? You know what I
right.
mean?
Well, and that's where So with people, I'm cynical. With God, and I still have that very. I'm fortunate that I do still have like the childlike faith. I mean, like I do have that, like the whole moving mountains thing. Like when God says, God, if God wants you to do it, you're going to do it. So I
Yeah.
mean, with and I'm gonna tell everybody that I just to throw this out there. I want you guys to understand the scale of what my God's going to do for us, right?
Come on.
So my goal, my initial goal is to purchase a 1,000 acre ranch. Like I'm not talking. Listen, if somebody comes and turns to me tomorrow and says, "Hey, we got 100 acres that we want to give you," don't get me wrong, I'm not going to turn it down. But
Right.
in
Right.
my
You're going to
in
be
my
looking at the
dreams,
900 acres around it. Right.
right? Okay, in my dreams, though, like it's like the facility needs to be 1,000 acres to be able to support the
Sure.
amount of cattle, to be able to
Yeah.
do the stuff. Because back to the process is that I want to be able to make it a self-sustaining
Yeah.
facility to where
Yeah.
the donations they will be nice to help with things, but to where we can create our own, our own uh, revenue, like where we're generating our own revenue, where we're
Yeah.
selling our own cattle, where we're branding.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
Morgan's talking about running bloodlines, like she wants to get into the
Right.
breeding aspect. Just so anyway. And I believe too, I think that a lot of people, and I think that this is where it's a difficult thing for people, is that your your faith is or your faith in what God can do is only limited by yourself. So a lot of people are
Yeah.
like, "Hey, you know what? I'm only going to shoot. If I can make $100, if somebody get $100 donated to me, like I'm doing something. You know what? I want $10 million. And you
Come
know
on.
what? If I get it, I'm not going to shoot a shot unless I got a chance of hitting something. And if I shoot for 100 and I get 100, it's my fault. If I shoot for $10
Right.
million and I get 5 million,
Yeah.
well, guess what? Too bad.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
I'm not going to be sorry. So anyway.
So earlier in a message, Ben, let me just read it verbatim. Hang on. Let me open up Messenger real quick. And this may not be something you may not even know what the hell he's talking about. But he said, Chris, oh, no, hang on. That's Kristen's. If Michael hasn't already showed you what he's dropping tonight, I'm excited for you. This came from Ben.
Yeah. So I dropped it. I sent it to you too. I sent it to a couple people and said, "Hey, let me get your."
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I
So,
told him, I said, man, he hadn't showed me nothing. I didn't know that's what he was talking about. Do you want to show that on here?
I mean, we can. Do you
All
have
right.
it?
Yep, I can. Let me let's see if I can do this. Oh, it says this channel does not have any content.
Hold on. Let me do this real quick. I bet I can pull it up real super quick. I don't know how to share it on your screen.
So you can go down there at the bottom in the middle. There's a share screen icon. He left. That's awesome. Give us just a second, y'all. Here he is. He's back.
Okay, you're saying go down the bottom of this
Yeah,
thing.
down at the very bottom in the middle, there's a like a computer monitor with an up arrow. It'll say share screen.
Yep.
And then you should be able to pick out the window or the Chrome tab or the entire screen,
Go.
and it should say down. Yeah, there you go. I see it now. All right, let's
go
bring
to
this
this.
in.
And here we go.
I wonder why that is not showing up. Beautiful.
In the dark, I see your eyes. Memories of
I'm going to pull us out while this is playing.
every whisper like a ghost. In the shadows, I'm alone. Every step you took away echoes haunt me day to day. Silence louder than a scream, lost inside this endless dream. fragile moments lost in time. Every heartbeat feels like crime. Moonlight fades and I'm still here, wrestling with my deepest fear, wishing you were by my side. In the shadows I lose sight. Tears fall down like autumn rain, catching whispers of your name. Heartbreak dances through the night. In the shadows I lose sight.
In the dark we find our way. Broken pieces learning to stay. With scars and whispers from the fight, we hold on tight to endless light. We won't let the shadows win. For every heart, a new beginning. Hope's a beacon burning bright, guiding lost souls through the night. Veterans with stories untold, wounded warriors growing old. You're not alone, we'll be your guide, with hearts as strong as the rising tide. We won't let the shadows win. For every heart, a new beginning. Hope's a beacon burning bright, guiding lost souls through the night. To the children in need we lend a hand to hold, hearts to mend. Infinite hope, a bond to share. In every smile we show we care. We won't let the shadows win. For every heart, a new beginning. Hope's a beacon burning bright, guiding lost souls through the night.
Dude, that was freaking amazing. Did you tell? And I thought it like when you shared it with me this morning, I thought it was cool as hell. But did you tell me that that is all original content, original music?
It is. So, and I
That
learned how to listen.
I remember thinking, I don't know where this music came from, but he needs to make sure and get copyrights to it because this fits too good not to keep there. You know what I mean?
So I'm going to tell you my cheat hack. So I created all the music with AI.
Okay.
Yeah, like everything. So I own the rights. It was, and I'm going to tell you how super, super hard it was. It took me, it didn't take me very long.
Dude, I just
So,
remember thinking how apt the lyrics were and the music was to both. Like I told you, it was two different vibes to the two
right.
different sections, right? Um, just how apt it was, and it was beautiful, dude. And I love that. Like I absolutely love it. That's badass.
Thank you. Well, the ed now I will say, so you have to also take into this account that I learned how to, like, I started my first process of video editing about 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. So,
You're
so
already ahead of me, and I've been doing this shit for years. So,
hey, so that actually took me about 18 hours of
okay,
figuring stuff out, and to sync everything and to do the transitions with the right words at the right place. And anyway,
yeah,
so, and I feel kind of, I'm not going to say anything, but I kind of feel proud of it. So if
no,
nobody else
dude, you
likes it,
should, and
I don't give a
you
shit.
can ask Kalila. Like she's asked me before about like doing intro because I've been helping her get started with her live streaming, and she's asked me about intro videos and stuff. And I'm like, look, sis, I love you with all my heart, but I hate doing it. Like I
Uh,
absolutely when I have to redo something for one of mine,
yeah,
like I'm just so I don't like it. Like I just don't. It's not my thing. Anyway, yeah,
right.
you absolutely should be proud. That's
Yeah.
freaking awesome.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's good stuff.
thank you, everybody. Yeah.
Yeah,
So anyway, I was like I said, that is going to. I mean, I put it on our website and I kind of posted it out on social media. But my goal my goal, and this is kind of like one of my 2025 goals, is that I want to get in front of churches. I want to get in front of
yeah,
groups of people, and that's to the point. I want this to be the introduction video to where it says it a whole lot better. My ADHD kicks in, and we can be talking about rabbits and squirrels and Jesus and everything else. So anyway,
yeah, 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 for sure. And I think that's a good place to. I mean, not that I want to end it, but
yeah, I get it.
that's a good way to end it. Is right there.
Some of us
And I
old
bet,
people got to go to bed.
yeah, I know, right?
Yeah, you're an hour
For
earlier
sure.
though, I think. So yeah,
Yeah. What's the website?
it's OperationInfiniteHope.com.
Okay, operationinfinitehope.com. I should have asked you that. Operationinfinitehope.com. Right there. Operationinfinitehope.com. Y'all go check him out. Y'all follow him on Facebook, LinkedIn. He's on Instagram. Where else are
I
you?
haven't. Well, I haven't posted my OnlyFans page yet, so I'll let that say that till
Nice.
later. I got my feet page. My OnlyFans feet.
Okay,
I'm just
that's
kidding.
how this is really being funded.
Right? Exactly. Hey, when you see my private jet here in a year or two, you'll know that my feet got us.
Right. And
Yeah,
let me say this real quick to anybody that's on here, and I think I saw Stephanie Craver. Is that your wife?
it is.
Um, and anybody else that's friends with Michael that I am not friends with because I'm terrible about going through the comments. If you're still hanging out here, please send me a friend request. I'd love to be connected with you, and just help support you in any way that I can. So please do that. Thank you, Kalila, for putting the link in the comments. She put the actual link in the comments. Thanks, sis. I appreciate you. Um, Dude, this has been awesome, man. Like I've loved just hearing the similarities in our stories of the way we were raised, how God brought us into identity, and then just giving us a vision and not knowing like the rhino. Like I'm gonna have to use that again because like that's a whole ass post. But like just having the rhino not being able to see this far in front of you, but just like running. Um, yeah, Leanne, I am a hugger, and you know that. Um,
It's okay. I'm
not being
good with my masculinity. We
Yeah, I am.
we'll do air hugs for today. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I love you too, Andrew. Just to hear that because at our board meeting last week, I was like, man, I know where God wants me to go. I don't know exactly how I'm going to get there, but I'm just running. You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
I can only see right here. This is literally as far as I can see. So that rhino analogy was like exactly what I needed to hear tonight. So thank you for that.
Good deal.
Who do I have?
Operation Infinite Feet from Casey.
Stop it, Casey.
Hey,
As long as there's no beans in the chili, like we're good.
And I'm going to say this too. You know, I did
Yeah.
get to sit with them at dinner, and you know that was an amazing. We had amazing conversations. Two amazing people. So
This is like my 11 or 12-year-old niece right here on YouTube.
sorry,
What is
I'm sorry. I apologize. No.
Oh shit! I might have to call my brother.
You better. I apologize for any. You know. Yeah.
No, you're good. Like this is definitely an adult show. Sometimes one of my nieces or nephews sneaks in here, but like this is definitely an adult show, and with not this type of adult content, but it's adult content.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? So you're good, bro. You're good.
Yeah.
So next week I have Lance Price and Ty Southern. If you're not connected with them either, they're with We Are Still Effing Here. It's a bunch of combat vets basically, and like Ty is a quadruple amputee. You know, he hit an IED whenever he was deployed, and it's just a bunch of guys that came together, guys and women that came together that have been through some stuff, and just to say we are still effing here. They're a little rougher around the edges than what I normally let. So we'll just see how next week goes. But there's going to be some cool stories because like Lance, he's the head guy. He's struggled with addiction. I don't know if Ty did so much, but he's definitely been through some shit. Just, you know, getting basically blown the hell up whenever he was overseas deployed. So yeah, it'll be a good show next week. So y'all be sure to tune in for that. Michael, dude, I appreciate you dropping in, man. Like this,
I appreciate you having me.
It. Like I normally stop somewhere around the 40 to 45 minute mark.
Yeah.
And I always tell my guests when they ask, like, how long is it going to go? I said, I normally try to cut it off 40 to 45 minutes, unless the conversation's going good. And we've doubled that. And that just goes to tell you how the conversation was because it's It doesn't even feel like it. So anyway, like I said, Kristen, Chancey, Stephanie, y'all shoot me a friend request, please. We're not having the beans going chili, Carlila or Ollie. Like we're not doing that conversation right now. They don't belong in chili. And I'm going to end on that note, and we will see y'all next week.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Bye, y'all.
Bye.